Well, hello, Tintin fans. I want to talk to you now about the good old paper 3 assignment sheet. They just keep on coming, don't they? So if you want to follow along with me, go to Content, and then in the left-hand toolbar, click on Major Paper Assignments and Related Materials, and then click on the Paper 3 Assignment Sheet Compare Contrast Essay. Obviously, for this paper, you're going to write an essay that compares and contrasts two of the following text of your choice that we're studying together in this unit. So you're going to choose two to compare and contrast. So you could choose All Over But the Shoutin' by Rick Bragg, Ours Was a Dad by Judy Davis, The Wedding Carriage by Sneha Saha, or Alzheimer's by Kelly Cherry. And so you're going to choose two of those. And so again, choose two that you particularly sort of resonated with. Important dates. The idea worksheet will be due Wednesday the 27th. And so you're going to share your idea for a text choice, a sense of direction about how to proceed by answering those idea worksheet questions. You'll click on the Assignments tab up toward the top of our course page, and you'll look for Idea Worksheet for Paper 3 and follow the instructions there. You'll submit before 11:59 p.m. on October 27th, and you want to look back at my comments once I've commented on your ideas. Then we're going to hold for Paper 3 a pre-writing day rather than a peer review day, and that will be due on the 31st, good old Halloween, on or before the 31st. So again, you'll click on the Assignments tab, you'll look for pre-writing for Paper 3, you'll follow the instructions there after you've read my comments on your idea worksheet, and you'll submit your introductory paragraph, your thesis statement as the very last sentence of that introductory paragraph, a brief informal outline of the paper, and your source material that you plan to use. So just like the peer review rough drafts, 10 points will be deducted from your Paper 3 grade if you do not submit the above materials before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, October 31st. Now, the reason that we're not doing a full rough draft is because at this point in the semester, I'm inundated with all kinds of grading, and also because I've given you extensive feedback on the first two major papers, and now it's time for you to try your wings and for you to assume more responsibility for your own writing. And you can look back at previous comments on the graded drafts of papers 1 and 2 to see where you were weak and where you were strong and what you need to improve to help you. The final draft of Paper 3 is due Monday, the 8th of November, before 11:59 p.m. So again, you'll click on Assignments to submit the final draft. Remember the policy, 10 points are deducted from your Paper 2 grade for every calendar day that it is late, including the day that it's due and weekends, and papers are not accepted after 5 days unless you have an official extension from me for a valid excuse. So a valid excuse is not, gosh, I'm overwhelmed with work. I'm so sorry, I can't get this paper done. Part of being a college student is juggling a lot of work. The specifics, this paper should be at least, again, 2.5 pages long. If it's not, points are going to be deducted. If it's longer than that, that's fine. It obviously is typed, double-spaced, Times New Roman 12-point font, standard margins. You have to document both of those texts that you're using to compare and contrast in MLA formatting, citing both of them in the body of your essay, using those quotes, and on a separate works cited sheet. So again, you're conforming to a formal academic structure. Your introduction with your thesis as the last sentence of that paragraph, the supporting paragraphs, and a formal conclusion. So the objective is twofold. First off, you're comparing the two texts. So what are their similarities? How are they alike? And then secondly, you're contrasting them. What are their differences? So to create a successful compare-contrast essay, here are the questions you should be asking yourself as you're writing. Do I begin with a hook that makes my reader want to keep reading? Have I clearly stated the titles of the two texts I'm writing about and the author's full names in my opening paragraph? By the time we get to the end of paragraph 1, we need to know what these two texts are that you're writing about and who wrote each one of them. Have I referred to the authors by last name only after I've mentioned their full names in my intro, right? Standard college protocol. I don't call them by their first names or their full names. I use last names only after that intro. Have I clearly stated my thesis, so my main idea or claim at the very end of my opening paragraph in my thesis statement? My thesis should make a claim about how these two texts are alike and or different. It may also provide some insight as to what one might learn through those similarities and differences that I'm noting. Have I quoted, got to quote, passages from both the texts that I've chosen in order to illustrate the similarities and differences I'm pointing out, citing the quotes correctly in MLA? Have I made certain to avoid using first person I and the words you or your throughout my essay unless they're part of a quote that I'm using, choosing instead to use one or ones? Have I used transition words and phrases so the reader can more easily follow my thoughts? Have I used sentence variety in my essay? So I want to vary the length and the arrangement of my sentences. In other words, I'm going to avoid back-to-back short, choppy sentences or back-to-back really long, convoluted sentences. Have I used language appropriate for college-level writing, or does my language feel informal and conversational? If it's too informal, those points are going to be deducted. It's time to sound like a college writer now. Have I organized this paper in a logical fashion? Have I carefully checked for typos and spelling, grammatical, and mechanical errors before submitting this to my instructor? This is college writing. We don't submit papers that are riddled with errors to a college professor. That does not fly. Have I asked someone else to read my essay and offer feedback? I can work with a tutor online. I can ask a classmate to review my paper. Have I met that minimum 2.5 full-page length requirement to avoid point deductions? And does my essay contain some insight regarding the significance, the meaning behind those similarities and differences? So here are, as always, some examples of possible intro, thesis, statements, and game plans for paper 3. And this first one compares All Over But the Shoutin' by Rick Bragg with Ours Was a Dad by Judy Davis. Many sons and daughters have experienced the grief of losing a parent, some in an overwhelming rush of love and happy memories, and others with a lingering sense of regret and pain. A thoughtful comparison of Rick Bragg's All Over But the Shoutin' and Judy Davis's Ours Was a Dad will reveal the common theme of parental loss, yet each work expresses its message with differing rhetorical techniques. While Davis uses repetition and sensory images, Bragg relies on dialogue. So if you examine that opening paragraph, that intro, you've got your hook that starts broadly with a statement that we can all pretty much relate to. Many sons and daughters experience the grief of losing a parent. And in fact, if you live long enough, you're going to experience that, sadly. Some with this overwhelming rush of love and happy memories because it's a loss that is poignant and emotional to you. But others with this sense of regret and pain, the way Rick Bragg felt about his dad. So now we narrow. A thoughtful comparison of Bragg's All Over But the Shoutin' and Davis's Ours Was a Dad reveals this common theme, right? So we've zeroed in on a commonality, parental loss. Yet each work expresses the message with differing techniques. And now the thesis, which is 2 sentences. This is the second sentence. While Davis uses repetition and sensory images, Bragg relies on dialogue, tells us what those differing techniques are. So we have a roadmap of that paper. So that writer is going to talk about the common theme, how it's revealed, but yet it's going about it in different ways, right? The paper is going to talk about repetition, sensory images, and dialogue. It's going to talk about the fact that in one case, Ours Was a Dad, experiences the grief of losing a parent with that rush of love and happy memories, while Rick Bragg's piece does just the opposite with regret and pain. Here's an example with the wedding carriage and Alzheimer's. As the baby boomer generation grows older, Alzheimer's disease has become more prevalent than ever, resulting in tragedy for its victims and their family members. Zania Saha's The Wedding Carriage and Kelly Cherry's Alzheimer's chronicle the stories of two different victims of this tragic illness and its effects on others, a daughter, a wife, and a caregiver. A careful comparison of the short story and poem will reveal a common theme: struggling with a disease that devastates the mind, leaving the body as a shell of its former self, while presenting the similar message through different genres and techniques. So this, again, is a very well-written intro, and you see the hook there. An idea that we all get, right? The baby boomer generation is aging. And as that is happening, guess what? We're going to see more and more and more cases of Alzheimer's, sadly. And this is a disease that doesn't just result in tragedy for its victims, but it affects the family. I know this very well because my mother had what's called early onset Alzheimer's disease. And she was diagnosed when I was only 11 years old. And at that time, you didn't hear the term Alzheimer's disease very often. We didn't even know what it was when the doctor told us that he thought that mother had early onset Alzheimer's. And so this disease didn't just affect my mother and devastate her life and turn her into a vegetable, essentially, but it affected our entire family. And I can personally attest to the horror of this terrible, terrible illness. So that hook really applies to a lot of people. And then the author narrows in. Zania Saha's The Wedding Carriage, Kelly Cherry's Alzheimer's. So we've got the titles of both texts correctly punctuated in quotation marks because they're shorter works. We've got the author's full names. And the similarity that they're chronicling the stories of victims of this tragic illness and its effects on other people as well. And then we get the thesis, a careful comparison of the short story and poem. So we've got a short story and a poem. Reveals the common theme, and we're given that theme, while presenting the similar message through different genres, short story, poetry, and different techniques. So this writer doesn't name the techniques, but leaves the door open in the paper to talk about a lot of different kinds of techniques that are being used, which is fine. So you've got to locate quotes and paraphrases from the works that prove that common theme of the disease's effects on its victims and on their family members and loved ones. You've also got to devote sections in your paper to the fact that one work is a short story while the other is a poem, those different genres, and talk about how that therefore causes the techniques and the writing to be very different. You should comment on how those differing genres present the common theme and the varying methods and techniques each author is using. So, for example, The Wedding Carriage is a narrative piece. It's a story that tells the story of Mrs. Cochran through the eyes of a caregiver who is a college student who's volunteered to work at the hospital where this elderly lady is a patient. And so the speaker in this story has no previous relationship with that Alzheimer's victim. But conversely, there's one of my favorite words there, Alzheimer's is a poem that presents the observation of an elderly man coming home from the hospital. And the observer, while not identified, is Kelly Cherry herself, who is the man's daughter. And if you read any information about the poem, you learn that. And the woman whom the man can't seem to remember in the poem is actually, in fact, his own wife, Kelly Cherry's mother. So it's very poignant that he's coming home and he recognizes a lot of things around the house, but he cannot for the life of him figure out or remember who that woman standing in the doorway to greet him is when it's his own wife. So the fact that neither person, though close to that Alzheimer's patient, is actually identified in Cherry's poem works to mirror the man's own inability to remember them. So there is just an amazing rhetorical technique that Kelly Cherry uses there. So that's the paper 3 assignment sheet, and I hope that this information's been helpful to you guys. Have a great day.